Hi, I'm Ben Joseph here. I'm going to moderate this bad boy. At the end, we have Kyle Muir. You may recognize him from such shows as Detentionaires, Terrific Trucks, which is a Sprout show coming up in maybe next year, I think, and Inspector Gadget, which would be on season 2 will be on Netflix, I would imagine. Nicole Demerse is right next to me. I don't know why I'm out of order here. She's doing Game On, a live-action sitcom on YTV with Samantha Bee from The Daily Show. She's doing Forget About It, the 9-story Teletoon late-night animated sitcom. And Camp Lake Bottom, another 9-story show on Teletoon. It's an animated kids show for ages 6 to 11. Doug Hatters over there, a great writer, has written on many shows. Almost Naked Animals, I guess he gave me the credit for. Sidekick, Inspector Gadget, and you're doing a show called The Becky and Bagel. I wasn't on it. Thanks for hiring me, Doug, for that one. Call it whatever you want. When's it on, Doug?
It's going to be on in the summer.
All right.
Teletoon.
Cool. And Amy Benham is right here. We were in the reboot room together last week. She has written on Odd Squad, which is one of the best shows going on. Day My Butt Went Psycho. And Reboot, and you did some other stuff. You've done millions of other stuff. But so I was quickly talk about the purpose of this panel. We have a couple of reasons. One, to help people who want to write animation understand the business a little, because it's a little daunting when you tell your parents, like, hey, I want to be an animation writer, and you're like, oh, you don't know what you want to do. Two, we could maybe get into this if you have an idea for a kid's show or something, how to make it, or what steps to do or what not to do. 3, maybe you just want to be a writer on some great shows like Gravity Falls or Wander Over Yonder or something, and how do I do that? Or 4D, you just want to talk to people who write and pick their minds for information and whatever. So we're trying to give you all the information we can do in 45 minutes. So I'm going to do the first topic is, so you want to be an animation writer, or how to disappoint your family in one easy step. So it's really hard to do that. So Kyle, why don't you talk about maybe like, where did you go to school? Did that help you break into the industry where you went to school?
Yes. Okay. So there's everybody has a different way to get in. But
Kyle, the mic.
Mike. Sorry. So how did I get into it? I didn't actually start trying to get into animation. I just wanted to be a film screenwriter, and that didn't work out. But I got into the place called the Canadian Film Centre, which really helped me advance my career, and that sort of started things for me. I was like comedy. I'm more of a comedy guy. I think that sort of helped me in animation. That's all I seem to work in these days, and I love it. But so I sort of had a roundabout way of getting into it. I went to various film schools, but then once I got into the Canadian Film Centre, that sort of jumpstart my career. And I think my first job was actually in animation. It was a kid's adult hybrid show called What It's Like Being Alone on CBC. It was a stop motion animated show, and from there I just kept working. I got on a bunch of sitcoms, and now I've sort of come full circle and back to kids animation again. So yeah.
Doug, do you have a similar? Did school help you
I don't think
break
that mic's
in?
working, by the way.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, it is working. He just likes your voice better. Yeah. Sultry.
Is the radio guy. Good morning. It's 15 minutes past the hour and minus.
Stay on target, Wedge.
I took the Humber comedy course here back in 2000, and then the film and television production course at Humber as well. Afterwards, and did it land me a job? No. But it gave me an opportunity to write spec scripts and have it looked at by professional writers. And so you learn a lot of the things that you shouldn't do, like screwing with the formatting. And just, it was just a really nice training ground. And then what did I first land? This will be an awful thing to hear, but it was 2 years before getting out of school, and I landed my first job. But on the upside, during those 2 years, my writing partner and I worked our asses off. We wrote multiple half hours movies, everything that just sort of gave us a good foundation, and it just kept us writing. And so then when we landed our first job, which was Digata Defenders and Gerald McBoing Boing.
I wrote on both those. So.
Exactly. At the same time, we never looked back. We've been writing solid ever since.
If you guys want, a spec script is like a sample script that you would write of a show, possibly on the air. Probably like right now, if you wrote a Modern Family spec script, you would write it not under the idea that it's going to get made, but just show off your writing talents and stuff. We'll get into that in a sec. Amy, how did school help you, if it did or not?
It did. I went to Ryerson for radio and TV, and an executive from Chorus came to talk to us in a similar panel type situation, and I cornered her after and was like, I would love an internship. And then they gave me a job because the internship program was too difficult for them. And I worked at an animation studio in production for 5 years before I broke into writing. And what that did, very similarly, was gave me access to scripts, people to pitch to. I did a ton of reading, and then when I was ready, I moved into writing.
Nicole, same question.
Not at all. I actually did marine biology, so I had nothing to do with writing at all, and biggest regrets is that I didn't write Finding Nemo and SpongeBob, but anyway, that's another conversation. I did a year of science journalism after school, after university, and hated it. I just kept wanting to make things up, and obviously you can't do that in journalism. Well, I guess if you work for Fox, but generally speaking, they don't like that. So I landed this job in television journalism in Ottawa. No offense to anyone who's from Ottawa, but I hated it. I was like 21 and living in Ottawa, and I just couldn't wait to get out of there. And the Canadian Film Centre started their primetime television resident program. So I had no social life in Ottawa, no friends, nothing to do on weekends. So I just spent my weekends writing this spec script, and it was called Interns. It's so much about this business is luck and timing, unfortunately. It's good and bad. And it was called Interns, and it was about 4 different interns, like a medical intern, a political intern, a television intern. It was so bad. But the Film Center, one of the shows they were writing was about interns in Ottawa. And there was a lot of journalists on the show, so they were like, oh my God, she's perfect. So that's how I got in. And like Kyle, programs like that are great because they open up so many doors, and everyone there wanted to write hour dramas. And I looked around the room, and there was like 15 people who all wanted the one job on hour dramas. And I had like massive student loans, so I said, well, I can't rely on the odds in this case. And at that point, Nelvana had like 30 shows in development, or in production rather. So I, just kept hitting up people at Nelvana and meeting story editors and taking people for coffee until finally someone allowed me to pitch. And then I worked my butt off, and I think I did like 50 pitches for this show. Finally, the story editor was just like, okay, enough, I'll give you one. And, I just kept inundating them.
So bothering people. Is
Well, no, but
yeah.
but respectfully bothering them. Like
Yeah.
I didn't, you don't want to be a pain.
Let's go on. That's good answers, everybody. We're going to talk about spec scripts for a sec, because we touched on it. A spec script is a sample script that you would write to showcase your ability. Kyle, do you have any thoughts on the type of spec scripts people breaking into the industry right now? Say you came out of college or whatever. What type of shows would you write, or depending on the genre, I guess, but
Yeah, well, it depends, right?
Microphone.
If you're in comedy, there's 2 ways of looking at it right now. Like you hear a lot of talk about people just wanting to see original specs. So original spec could really sort of hammer home your voice and who you are as a writer. Original spec is your original work that you've written. So it's a half hour, 1 hour animated. That's what I tend to do these days. I actually haven't written a spec script in a couple years. I used to have a bunch. I used to have a SpongeBob one, Aqua Teen Hunger Force. They're a good idea. I think you should have both. I think you should spec a show, an existing show that you really like, that you're familiar with, and you should have your own original spec that shows off your voice and your talent. Ultimately, I think. Yeah.
Doug, your thoughts? Doug, you do a lot of hiring too, Doug. When you're running a show, when you have a writer, what type of specs do you like to see?
Well, the types of spec that I like to see are the ones that are directly related to the show that I'm hiring for. And it's, luckily it's a pretty dominant genre right now. It's boys, 8 to 11, squash and stretch, stupid. So there's a lot of examples of those types of shows out there, and so that's what I like to see. But if you're going to write a spec, my opinion or my suggestion would be that write what you like first and foremost. If it's sitcom, or if it's 1 hour drama, or if it's animation, just write what you like, because that's the stuff that you're going to put joy into, right? And I would say that that's what you're then going to be most successful at, hopefully. But that being said, you roll the dice. Who knows how the hell you're going to get into the industry? It's the same thing with me. Adam and I had written a bunch of sample work for like everything except animation. It never even actually occurred to us to do animation. And then the same thing, Nelvana had an open call for anyone to submit show ideas. So we submitted our stuff to Jocelyn Hamilton, and she actually took us to dinner, to lunch. That was amazing. And she says, and I love this thing that you've created, and we're not going to make it, but would you like to be put up for other shows? And we said, yeah. And so then they did. But I mean, just as far as spec scripts go, write what you like, write what you have fun. Otherwise, it's just work. And if it's just work, don't bother.
Yeah.
Amy, you have some thoughts on spec scripts for people?
I totally agree with Doug. Write something you love, and write something that's on TV right now. Don't write something that's 20 years old. Like if you love Star Trek: The Next Generation like I do, don't write that one, because you want something that feels fresh and modern and shows your voice in the best possible way. You also can't write for each show you want to be on. Like you're probably, like, spec scripts take so much time and energy. Write what you love. Find something you love that you think you can tell an interesting story on. Like if you think you can tell an interesting Gravity Falls, do it. And originals too. Originals are amazing. If you're just breaking in, I think you probably need a spec of a show, as well as having an original. Having a spec of a show that exists will probably get your original read. And I think that would, that's the way I would do it.
Nicole?
I concur with everything the panelists said. I think the tricky thing when you're first breaking into the industry is there's different categories. There's 11-minute boys action adventure. There's late night animated primetime comedy. There's, then you have all the live action stuff. You have live action kids. You have tween sitcoms. You have teen melodramas. You have so many different genre, and then you have the adult stuff like dramas and comedies. And the one thing that I find new writers make the mistake of, I just met with one recently, and she was writing an Adventure Time, and she said, "Oh, I'm gonna use this for everything." And I said, "Well, you can try, but if you submit that to a CTV primetime comedy, there's no way they're gonna read an Adventure Time. You're not even gonna get eyeballs on it." So when you're first starting out, unfortunately, the more you can write and the more diversity you have in your portfolio, the better. It's just going to open more doors. If you only have Adventure Time and Gravity Falls, that's going to get you 11-minute animated work if they're really good. But if you have a primetime comedy, if you have a sci-fi drama hour, the more diversity in your portfolio, the better. So unfortunately, when you're first starting out, just keep writing. Don't stop.
Mm-hmm. I think
none of it goes to waste.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll never go to waste. Even the stories that you write or the jokes that you write, you will use those again somewhere. If they don't sit there dead in that spec script, that'll never get bought, because it can't be, almost legally, I think, actually. It just never goes to waste. I mean, we Adam and I, we have this set of characters called Kyle and Eric that have made it into every single development project that we've done, and just because they're actually Adam and I, it's actually Adam and I. But so you write your specs, and the more specs that you write, or the more scripts that you write, you just get better at it. Yeah. It's a muscle, right? And so I wouldn't shy away from thinking that having just one script, like you were saying, that will sort of service a bunch of shows, because it really won't. Not only will it not get read, the email will just get deleted. It'll just be gone. If you just kind of have to know who you're targeting. and then send something specific.
I think the Canadian industry, which I'm speaking of specifically, like, you don't get a no, you just don't hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, radio silence.
My advice too is most people in Canada, the broadcasters, hate their own TV shows. So don't do a Canadian show. Like, don't do like Nunchucks or Camp Lake Bottom, but do a Gravity Falls, because they'd be like, oh, that show's good. Like they have a weird self-loathing thing about our own shows. So I always tell, don't write a Canadian show, because people don't want to read a Canadian show. They'd rather read a. Also, when you're doing a spec, like, watch that show. And you have to study it. You have to like watch it show like 10 times and then plot out like how many pages, like how long is Act 1, how long is Act 2, how long is Act 3, how many jokes per scene, like how many scenes do they have, so you know the formula of that show. Like, you really need to go to school on that show. You can't just be like, I know it's 2.5 Men, I know how to write a 2.5 Men. No, you gotta know like what happens.
And make sure that you don't write an episode that already exists, right? Like, you want to write like as if you're writing for the show and you're pitching something that would actually get produced, even though it never will, because if you write something that's already been produced, it's like,
and
it's like you're plagiarizing.
It's gonna happen though. It's gonna happen 9 times out of 10 that the idea that you have for your spec gets sort of done on a show or another show, and then you just can't be like, oh, screw. Like, at least you're on the right track. Right? At least you know the show, and also it teaches you how to write. Like, you're like, how do they do it differently than how I did it? And
how did they do it really well?
Yeah.
Demonstrate. Yeah. Oh, that's how a pro would do it. Oh,
but you might not be able to use it. Like, I had a script submitted to me when I was staffing on a show, and I knew the show, and it whether they might have written it before. Like, they might, giving them credit, they might have written it 2 years before. But I'm reading it going, okay, it just seems like you just transcribe the episode. Like, you get into that weird. So if I've written specs before where the show has trumped me, and then I just can't use it.
Well, also, if you're let's say, okay, as an example, we have Inspector Gadget. We're working on this season. I worked on last season. If you want to get on Inspector Gadget, don't write an Inspector Gadget as the sample, right? Because you're about to give them a sample of the show that those writers right now, or the story editors, currently know really, really well. So any mistakes that you make in it, it's going to be so glaring. So you'll just want to avoid that. Yeah. That's all I have to say about that.
All right, the next topic. Let's say I've got an awesome idea for an animated TV show, right? Because some people here have an awesome idea for a show, or you wrote a little book, you self-published.
Which we won't steal at all.
We won't steal. We're totally
Go
steal.
ahead.
But like, right? Just pitch some ideas down, you guys. What should you do first, Kyle? Like, if you had it, like, what would your advice be to someone who's maybe out of school and they're like, I've got it. Me and my friends have this great idea. He's an artist or whatever, and we drew an idea. What would you say to them?
Yeah, well, it's tricky when you're coming out of nowhere. It's really tough. I mean, you already know that, but you network, go to certain events where people hang out. Like, there's a thing called Ink Drinks Canada on Facebook where there's writers. I haven't been there for a while. Have you guys been there? But you could get a web series going, get some traction on the web. That's worked before for people. Getting network deals. If you get views, you can go to. I don't know. You want to help me with this one, Doug?
Yeah.
First places to go.
Mike, Doug, the mic. Mic it up.
Yeah.
My opinion is persistence.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's the biggest thing. Like, you can go on to IMDb and look up all the existing shows and find out who the producers are or what the production company is on all these places, and now you know that production company makes that animated series, and I've got an animated series that's kind of feels like it could match that show or be played before or after that show. I know that production company makes that show, so I now can get in. Every production company's got a development person or development officer or whatever they're called, and it's their job to find the next big hit. And to be honest, they will look at your stuff. They will. If you're persistent, you get it in there. It's in the right format. It's in a non-offensive email with punctuation and capitalization.
Be sober when you're.
Be sober, you pricks.
Yes.
I
want to second that. If you're a writer, then have punctuation and spelling down.
I tell you, I recommended a writer. I won't say who.
Say who.
I recommended a writer to a series, to a story editor, and I just introduced them, and it's like, okay, now you guys talk and so on. A couple months later, I ended up talking to the story editor and said, how did it go with this writer? And he says, you know what, I got to be perfectly honest. I didn't really think I was that kind of guy, but to be really stickler for details. But this guy, this writer, emailed him and didn't use any capitals or punctuation in the email. And the story editor's like, I didn't think I would ever care about that. But then it occurred to me, this guy's writing, or he's applying for a writing position, and he didn't use part of the tools of being a writer. So he said, I kind of just ignored his email, and that was the end of that. And so it makes a difference. It makes a difference. 6. That was the answer to the question.
6. Amy, do you have some thoughts about whatever we were talking about just now?
I digressed. I totally forgot what the hell we were talking about.
Yeah.
My first thing would be to study the format and then make it yourself. I think that's probably like going to production companies is an amazing way to like do everything Doug said.
You totally disagree, though.
I
totally disagree.
I think
Bring it.
I think it's hard to get noticed if you haven't done a lot of the legwork yourself, and I think school is a great way to get noticed coming out of school. But if you're coming out of it cold or from a different path, writing a one-page or a pilot of your thing, I think, is probably a pretty good way to get noticed. There's also and there's a lot of resources like Ink Drinks. Women in Animation is really awesome.
Yeah, that's another one.
And it's open to dudes too, like totally welcoming. We're just supporting women in animation, but everyone can support women in animation. Dudes, like, super inclusive. And they're on Facebook.
We aren't allowed to speak or make eye contact.
They have to wear all white. No.
But yeah.
Nicole?
I concur with all of this. I think digital web series is a great way if you have the capacity to do that to get views, because then you can go into a broadcaster and say like, look, I got a million hits or whatever. But I think if you can't go that way, and I'm not an animator, I'm just a writer, so. I think it's really important to get some credits, and I know that's really the catch-22 is, you have to get some credits, you have to establish yourself, hopefully get an agent, which requires, again, some credits. And then, I've written for like 45 shows, and I've had tons of development deals. I've never gotten one of my shows in production. Someday, I hope. I've ran other people's shows that I didn't create, but I've never gotten my own show that I created in production. So it's really tough. And I think, you just keep doing it, and it basically. This is the funny thing. People always joke about, you're going to steal my idea. You're going to steal my idea. Never worry. I'm flipping my pen. Never worry about someone like us stealing your idea. It's not going to happen, because ideas really are a dime a dozen. Not to say that you don't have good ideas, but it's execution. It's like, can you execute? Can you run a show for 5 years, 100 episodes, make them fresh, make them what people want to watch? It's all in the execution, and the only way you can prove execution is by having credits, and by being part of the industry, and by knowing people and building your repertoire. And so people buy shows based on execution, like
And as far as fear of losing your idea, that just sounds like so much work to steal somebody's idea and then deal with the potential fallout drama that comes with it. Like, there's so much built-in drama anyways. Like, I get exhausted even just thinking about taking somebody's idea.
Exactly.
I'm exhausted right now for saying that. So.
And like the elevator pitch that you give to someone, like if you just stood up and were like, my idea is like your intern's idea.
Yeah.
Everyone in this room would do it differently, though.
Right,
like, I thought that was an amazing
Yeah,
idea, and I was like, that
And
is
the
cool.
last thing you want to do at this stage is keep your work from being seen. You want to get your work out there. That's the most important.
And if you have an idea, if you could write a log line, like a 1-sentence summary of your show. If you go like, hey, what's your show about? Oh, it's about space guys, and then they go to asteroids, and then like you're like, what's the one line? Like, don't bore. Like, if you in your head can't figure out what's the one sentence of what your show is about, then you don't have a show probably. And if you can't explain it to someone in one sentence, then you got to go back and make sure you can explain it to someone. And that's really the most important thing that young writers don't really. They write like a page, and you're like, well, I don't want to read a page. Just tell me you have Tarantino in an elevator. You got 10 seconds. Tell him what your what your pitch is, and usually people can't.
Yeah.
And it's a skill. It's like economy of words or whatever they say. But what do you think, you guys? Kyle, you think if you're doing an animated show, Mike, you're pitching it, do you need art for it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've always written, like I'm developing a show right now that it has some art, but I'm not really responsible for, so I don't know. That's the answer to the question. If I write a Bible for a show, I don't have any art in it usually. But yeah, I mean, I guess it couldn't hurt.
A Bible for everyone. Is
a Bible,
not
sorry,
like,
yeah.
Not like a hotel room Bible, but like a.
It's got really religious.
It's a document that you write about your show, so it would be about what's your show about, who are the characters, what are the settings, what's the tone of it, and some sample episode ideas. So it's
certainly like a lot of the ones I come across on shows I work on, a lot of them do have art. I mean, for example, the Inspector Gadget one has a ton of art in it. So probably if you're coming up with something.
I would say that it'll help. It'll really help. No, I'll tell you, it is a lot easier to dangle a picture in front of a producer than it is to take a thick Word document and dangle it in front of them and have the same. A picture will give them a wow factor that's just immediate. They'll be able to generate their own image of what the show should be. A picture speaks, at least 8 or 10 words. So if you can hook yourself up, especially starting out, like if you're established enough, you don't need it, because then you just give them the one pager and it'll go from there. But starting out, I recommend that you find someone to draw some pictures. That would be my take on it, just especially if you're starting out. There's no better way to get the information across than with a picture. It's fast anyways.
It's easier these days for an artist to get a show option than a writer to get option.
Yeah.
Usually network will option a show based on its art, and then they'll hire the writer to make the show.
And then they'll hire us, yeah.
Yeah, and then they won't get the credit. Created by credit, be like, no, they created it, they drew it.
Could you make this into a show now?
Yeah, we get that. We get that a lot. So, Amy, you have any thoughts on the art development?
I don't think it's necessary. I think it will definitely help. If you have if you do art, if you have a cool artist you want to work with, amazing. That said, I don't think it's necessary, but what you have to do is make it sort of leap off the page then. So you have to have your characters have to be fun and exciting, or wherever your tone is. Like for animation, fun and exciting. The tone has to be really crisp and clear, and you have to be able to, the one page that you submit, or the first page of your Bible, or the first page of your spec has to be so leap off the page great. With it, because it has to work harder if it's just a page of text. But totally do it without art if you don't have an artist. Don't stop writing if you don't have an artist.
Don't draw it yourself.
Don't draw it yourself. Also, don't draw it yourself. If it's not good, don't send it with bad art.
Don't send in SpongeBob pictures and be like, it's kind of like this. Also, sorry for a ditch document. Sometimes if they want to see a 2-pager or a 5-pager. 5's probably the standard, what people like to read these days. Nicole, any thoughts on art or pitch Bibles?
I mean, I concur with what everyone was saying, and Amy included, although I'm just going to take a slightly different tack. I think if it's a live action, a kid's show, then no, you probably don't, you don't want art, maybe a cool show logo or something, but, because it's a visual medium. So I think anything that, appeals to the visual side of it is going to help you. So I would respectfully disagree that I think for animation, if you know some artists, trade favors right at the beginning. Maybe an animator, and maybe you can help them with the writing, and they can help you with some it's a lot of money. I get it, to hire an animator, but I really think it helps if you're doing animation specifically.
Get a lawyer. Get a good lawyer. Anyway,
that's a good point. Actually,
get a lawyer.
That's a really excellent point. You know what? Protect yourself too. It's going to cost a little bit of money up front, but if you work with someone, get some sort of an agreement in place, because the way life works is if you work with someone and you don't have an agreement, like i.e. what the animator is going to get if the show goes, if they're going to be able to be the director on the show, which probably they won't. You need something legal in writing because as life tells us all the time that that's the show that's going to get picked up. And then there's going to be someone who's going to come back at you and be like, I created that, I drew all that. So,
It'll tear friendships apart too, really. Anyway, we gotta just go for questions. Anyone have any questions about stuff? We'll answer anything you want, really. Yeah.
I want to go back to like specs and stuff.
Sure.
So, say a network or like a production company are looking for submissions that should include one original and one spec script. Do you find that it's better to keep both of them within the same genre, or like diversify a little bit to show off a little bit of what you can do, especially for production companies, or maybe even like talent agencies, because they want to sort of match you up with.
Go Doug.
In my opinion, it just needs to be relevant. Like the material that you submit, like if they're looking for, let's say Nelvana's looking for open submissions again, and they want an original piece and they want a spec. If it's wide open, then it's kind of wide open when you can send in. But if you know that they're looking for boys 8 to 11 squash and stretch just meaning that it's fantastical and they can literally squash and stretch and blow up characters without them actually being damaged. Anyways, but if they're looking specifically for that, well, then you want to try and get as close to that as possible. You don't want to send them a community script, right? So you just want to be as close as you can in the time that you have. I mean, if it's a month away, well, then write something, but if it's Friday, give it your best shot. Go with what you got, baby.
Yeah, and the tricky thing about specs too is to make sure you have something that's around, like Doug's saying, relevant. It's still on the air, that maybe has got a couple seasons left in it too.
That Benny Hill spec script isn't working.
What's that?
That Benny Hill spec script.
The Benny Hill, no.
No,
It's a little old. It's a little old. But yeah, you never know. You might get some. But yeah, so trying to find something that's popular, trying to find something that has some longevity to it, something that really well. So at least you can use it for a few years. That's the other thing, because otherwise you end up writing them constantly. Right?
Nicole?
It's hard. It's a heartbreaking reality. This has happened. A couple years ago, my agent bugged me for a new spec, and I wrote it up all night, which lasted 2 seasons, right? And like literally, I watched. Sometimes as writers, I don't know if you watch the upfronts and you're like, oh God, please renew that show, because you're like, otherwise you have to start over from scratch. Because the reality is, if the show's not on the air anymore, no matter how good it is, that's pretty much it. So you absolutely want to keep your spec scripts up to date. But that's a good thing. You could do an original spec, of your show. Harder generally to do it really well, but it's great because it shows your voice and it'll never go out of date. So
sometimes I heard of a spec where somebody wrote a NCIS/Dexter mashup spec script, and it sounded like a cool idea. Like that's like very memorable. Like somebody mashed up, That's pretty cool. Amy, you have thoughts on that, or should we?
If you know, yeah, I do. If you know what you want to do and you think that you can get there by showing 2 different sides of the same equation, like if I love sci-fi and I love animation, and so if I wanted to do half-hour sci-fi animated original and write a Rocket Monkeys is a bad example.
Reboot.
A reboot would be like the new one that'll be on TV in
2
2018.
years.
But
Set your PBRs.
but that would be good 2 thing. Or if there's a live action show that is something that you'd love to, like live action kids is something that you'd love to do, and there's an animated that has something in common with it, some intersection, I would try to vary it in that way, like related that can show your skills.
So to answer your question, if you just got to know the demo of what they're looking for, right? Whatever. If it's
gotta be the demographic at least.
Yeah, you got to just hit if you know it's for global and they're looking for a prime time, then it's going to be a little older and a little grittier. Maybe if it's for YTV, you got to know it's for 6 to 12-year-olds with no swearing or a lot of dancing and stuff. So just got to know your audience, right? And I think sometimes as writers up here, everybody gets typecast into a particular genre, so maybe that's also beneficial to you. Like, oh, I need the genre girl, or I need the girls, preschool girl, or whatever, yeah, whatever. Like, people get typecast into being experts, and that kind of helps you. But
actually, can I comment on that?
Yeah.
I mean, even up here, I don't know if I speak for myself and the panel, but we get typecast, right? I mean, I wrote Degrassi for years. I wrote tween stuff for years, and I got typecast as that. Go to Nicole for that. But it's just beholden on. I still have to do it. If I say hypothetically wanted to apply for a job on Orphan Black, like, they're not going to take my word that I can write an Orphan Black. I have to actually write an Orphan Black and show them, right? So even at my level of seniority, if you want to break out of that, that typecasting, you can. It's in your power. You just have to prove it.
It's hard, though. It's
for sure.
Definitely, yeah. I think it can be beneficial too. Like, in my case, I wrote a lot of half-hour sitcoms here, and then if you're lucky, Canada makes like 2 or 3 of them every year. So it's tough. They're tough to get on them, but I find these days if you have a sense of humor and you like comedy, there's a lot of work in kids animation. It's really quite helpful to have some comedic chops for that line of work, because it can be a good thing too to be typecast. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Bought my house.
Yeah. So yeah.
Any other questions out there? Yeah, we'll go over here.
If you're writing a spec for something that's still on the air, is there any way to get a hold of the series Bible, or is that a closely guarded secret that you only get when you're?
There's some around online.
Yeah, you
I
can
haven't
find
seen-
anything
yeah.
online. And when I was in school at Ryerson, back in the day, we had to write a spec for a show, and we had to actually write a letter to the production company asking for a spec in the Bible, and they mailed it to me. So I'm pretty sure if you know
Horseback.
3 months later, but you could just everything's available. All the information's available online. Who the production company is, who the writers are. You could just you could find stuff out.
And sorry,
No,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No.
There's also Simply Scripts has a lot of scripts for popular TV shows, which is like even better, I think, for writing a spec than reading the Bible. Like, the reading the Bible is great, always, but a script will tell you the formatting, how the jokes per page, the lengths and stuff when people are looking at your script to compare it against the real show.
Yeah. Read as many specs as you can before you tackle a show. But Bibles actually are a weird thing, because once you get into production, you don't normally use them. Like, they're sort of
old.
Yeah, by that point, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're more used for development, and just, sometimes they'll send you a Bible because you're going to write on the show, and they want you to read all the character descriptions and stuff. So they're not really closely guarded secrets. Like, they're probably the easy, I would send people old show Bibles. I'd have no problem with that. So, I don't think you'd have a problem finding those.
Yeah, they just become irrelevant really quickly, because as you're writing the show, the characters are going to change, because the Bible's written before, or at least in tandem with maybe the original pilot script or 2 or 3 scripts. Whereas the series, after the first season is written, the characters often don't look exact, or don't sound or act exactly like they are in the Bible. So the Bible's not going to do you.
A Bible's used to sell the show, usually, and it's written like 2 years before you, or a year before you actually go, and then things change, and usually people don't go back and re-update the Bible because it costs money, and companies are too cheap to do that. So, another question, anybody? Who wants to choose? We'll go back there, then we'll go across.
I kind of have 2 questions.
Oh, I don't think we can do that. I'm sorry.
Kneel before Zod.
Go ahead.
I think it was Amy who said that you moved into writing when you were ready. How do you know?
Well, I said that because I had a sort of a tricky path. I started at a production company, and I was pitching to everyone who would listen. And this is something that might happen. Like, it's kind of a shitty story. So I had
language.
I had a yeah, right. I had a premise used, and they didn't tell me. And it kind of sucked. And then I stopped trying. And so stopping trying, like, sometimes bad things will happen. Never stop trying. Oh my God, never stop trying. I feel like I wasted years working there, knowing what I wanted to do, but I just didn't want to try again. And then a producer found out, not necessarily the whole story, but knew that I wanted to write. And she was like, nope, you're going to write now, and called up my story editor and was like, you're giving her a webisode. And I was like, no, like she did this in front of me, and I'm like, no, you can't do that. Oh my God. And because I just I hadn't thought about it in so long, and it hurt to try again. But then I did, and it was amazing, and I'm so happy, and I was miserable before. So Reddy's sort of a,
You owe that woman.
oh my God, do I, my life.
It's
yeah.
funny because there's so many, we get so jaded in writing that, and the stuff that sort of leaps out, the memories that leap out are just the dicks that are in the industry, right? But the truth
So
is,
many.
I know there's been as many good moments like that too, where there's just as many good people.
Oh, yeah.
Like
definitely,
us, we're amazing. We are. Oh my
We're
God.
not we're not gonna read your specs.
Yeah, we're also not gonna-
You know, my answer to that would be, this is such a weird business, and it always hits me like there's so much asked of us, and I don't think that people on the outside realize the diversity of talents you have to have in this business, in the sense that you have to be really okay. You know, you're a writer when you want to spend 8 hours a day by yourself with a computer and not see people, and if that makes you happy, then you're a writer. Because some people want to write and they don't ever do it. They don't ever sit down. So on one hand, you have to be someone who's kind of a loner personality and loves to sit in a room for 8 hours a day and not see people. And then you also, if you're on set, you have to be someone who thrives with 100 people yelling requests at you, and your phone never stops ringing, and your email never stops, and it's 24/7 for 8 months of your life, and you have to be comfortable being around people all that time. And then oftentimes writers are kind of introspective and quiet, and we like to be on our own, and then people will say, well, you have to go out there and sell yourself, because the biggest fallacy is that agents do that for you, and you got to go out there and network, and you got to sell yourself and sell your show ideas, so you have to be a salesperson. So it's
If you're not good,
Yeah.
if you're an introvert, animation writers, you rarely have to deal with people, except when you go to a room. But if you're in the room,
terms are
if
becoming
you're
more common.
it's more welcome to the jungle. You gotta, if you're the alpha male, if you're not alpha male, you better damn well have a good write that script perfectly. If you're quiet in the
pitch
room,
that you give
Yeah.
better be bang on.
yeah,
Right, yeah.
it's a little more pressure on you, but that's the way it is, right?
But I'll
So-
tell you, this is slightly off topic, but on topic still. I had a teacher in Humber. Her name's Linda Cash, and she was in all the Christopher Guest movies, and she was the Philadelphia cream cheese lady, the angel.
Whoa.
Yeah. Anyways,
Name
and
drop in
she, I know, totally.
Hollywood.
Whatever. Philadelphia cream cheese angel. We hang. But she, if you look at her CV, she works constantly, absolutely year round. She's been in major blockbuster movies. She's been on every American sitcom in existence. She continually works, and she says one of the reasons she says she knows she's not Meryl Streep, but she knows exactly where she fits in her level of skill. But the reason she keeps getting hired back is because she is a pleasure to work with. She's professional. Her interpersonal skills are perfectly fine. She hangs out and she's friendly, and she never causes a problem to anyone. And to be honest, that really applies to writing as well. For myself, I hire writers all the time, and I hesitate to say this, but I often look for new writers. That's a big thing for me. Is you got to be decent enough to work with, persistent but not a pain in the ass.
What's your number, Doug?
Let's
Shout out your phone number. I'll say this about these guys. I know in the Bell Diversity thing, both Kyle and Doug was a mentor, and Kyle, they both do really great work with young writers who need help, and we all we all been there, so
Yeah.
we're not gonna read your specs still.
No.
Let's be real.
I mean, my best advice for that is, like you said, educate yourself on IMDb. Everything's out there now, right? I mean, you can find out everybody who worked on a show, and find their emails. There's nothing wrong with asking for a 15-minute coffee, right? That's my, can you sit down with me for 15 minutes, or can I call you on the phone? But just be respectful. the only thing that ever ticks me off with new writers is like if I say, hey, you know, come to my neck of the woods and I'll meet you for a coffee. Just make it easy on that person. You know, go to them. Don't change the time. Don't cancel. You know, all those little things. Don't take up too much of all those things. All those kind of just really polite things will go a huge long way, especially in Canada. I mean, I'd say like 90% of the industry is just really nice people. There's always the 10% of jerks that won't return your email, but I think most people. What were you doing? Most people will be really amenable as long as you're amenable.
Yeah.
So we have is there another question somewhere in the biosphere over there? Oh, well, we'll come back to you for the second. How about that? It better be good, though. Are you going to send a spec of, like, say you want to write Orphan Black script and you send an Orphan Black script to Orphan Black, they won't read it, right? Like, that's legally, they can't read it.
Yeah, I don't think legally they can.
It's hard to get a script to people without an agent, to be honest. It's a little hard because legally there's a lot of little...
Although animation, animation you can often pitch. I mean, that's how I broke in, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, you know, meet and greets, go to industry functions, meet people who are actually running shows and writing shows. Such, you know, Doug was just saying he's doing one now. That you know, and then ask. Sometimes I'll let you pitch, and then work really, really, really hard on those pitches. I mean, that's how I broke in. Like the story I told about writing like 50 pitches for this show, and I got 3 out of that. And then the second job was even harder to get than the first because everyone thinks you're a one-hit wonder. And then once you get the third show and the fourth, it starts to snowball, and then you get an agent. So it's really pitching through animation. Sometimes they'll let you do that. Like, it's a viable.
And I think that it's kind of like who you know. You kind of, I mean, I don't often take out of the blue. Somebody just managed to somehow get a hold of my email. And I don't often do just out of the blue stuff. But if somebody I know says, "Oh yeah, read this guy," I'll read that guy, even if they don't have any credits. You know, so it's a very mercurial thing about how you get into this industry. But again, persistence, right? Without being annoying.
But if those people came to you, say like out of a CFC program, Canadian Film Center, or like NSI has Totally Television, or say they won Praxis, screenwriting competitions are really good, then you might be more willing to.
I need to sort of, there needs to be some sort of indication that these guys actually want to be writers and not just having written a script. You know, there's a difference between somebody who writes a script and then a writer. A writer is somebody that writes and just kind of continually writes.
You just have to be in the right place at the right time and be prepared, because you never know. Like, you're going to be like, "Oh, you have a spec that I could read?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'll go home and write that tonight."
To quote Oprah, luck is opportunity meets preparation. And so was I lucky that I got on Gerald McBoing Boing? Sure. But I put myself out there in any avenue I could think of, cold calling, anything. And then I also had a wealth of spec scripts that I could draw upon when that opportunity arose, because it came from out of nowhere, from an absolutely unlikely, from my voice agent, said that she knew an American guy that was, this is Gareth Laney, was looking for Canadian writers. Have you got something? And he needs something like tomorrow. So I had something, so I pulled it and sent it.
Deanne, are we out of time? Are we good? Or some guy popped in? I just didn't know. Could have been the Swiss chalet I ordered. It's a little late. Okay, we'll do a quick question. Anyone have a quick? You got it right there. Amy?
That I wrote a webisode?
No, the online script for source scripts, script strictly.
Oh, Simply Scripts. Simply Scripts is a maybe gray level legal resource of scripts. Tons of movie scripts and
there's a
and
few
TV
places.
scripts.
You can look them up. Like JoeBlow.com has got them as well.
If you Google
Drew's, it used to be. I don't know if it still is. Scriptorama. Drew Scriptorama.
Oh yeah, Drew Scriptorama.
Yeah, there's a bunch. Just Google scripts, TV
Yeah,
scripts. I'm sure you're
Yeah,
fine.
Google like name of the show you want to look for a script for, and
Ask
script.
Jeeves. He'll find it
Oh, I
for you.
find too, if you put in PDF after the script, sometimes it's easier on Google. Just like whatever
Yeah.
the script is PDF, and it'll pop up.
Corner pocket. Yeah.
Woo! Hey, cuz. Hey, cuz. Yay! Feeling the love. Someday you could be this. I'm so sorry. Was I awesome?
Very memorable. I think he came to my class. Doug, you always. Sorry, I was gonna say it's just like always good to have the idea in the back of your head, but always good to say I'm open to working with you.
Yeah. Like I think that it's great to be prepared. Like we went and pitched this one show idea around a 1 hour. Of course, never saw the light of day. Everyone loved it, but it just whatever. This bastards. But what they did enjoy is that we really thought about the season arc. And actually, we thought like two seasons in, and we had episode ideas for every step along the way. But what was nice is also that we were not precious about it, right? So they said, oh, you know what would be interesting? How about if we did this? And we're like, we're not going to be just, if we didn't like the idea, we'd probably still sort of bump on it. But the idea was great. And so that wiped out both of our seasons of story ideas. But so what? Because, if they said yes, we would then have a show.
Yeah.
But 9 times out of 10, if you're a young writer with no experience and they like your show, you're gonna get put with a writer with more experience who's gonna take over the show, and you'll become like a producer on it who can give ideas. But they're gonna hire someone to develop that usually because they don't trust someone with no experience, like 9 times out of 10, right? You would think.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
Do that.
Learn from the person you're working with.
That's a great point. That's probably going to happen. I see a lot of Ryerson kids who get their idea purchased, and then it comes to people such as ourselves and to develop. And sometimes you take it on, sometimes you don't, because sometimes it's easier just to do your own thing, because you don't have then you don't have to worry about dealing with someone else who wants co-created by. But I think just being open to that, realizing that, hey, if you are one of the less than 1% of people who get their show purchased without any existing credits, right out of Ryerson or Humber or what have you, be open to learning. You might not get to write that first season, right? You might be, the story coordinator. You might be this is virtually basically a secretary of the writing room. You might get a script. You might not. Be open to that. Just be open to learning, because
be a sponge.
Literally, you're less than 1% already. You're already doing so well. So just, like you said, don't be precious about it. I mean, even though it really sucks if they buy your idea and you can't write on the show the first season, if you're that person who's like, I just want to learn, I just want to be in the room, can I do something? Chances are you'll be able to write second season and third season and fourth season. And it's just...
Everything's a learning experience. Every situation, every meeting, every spec you write, you learn something. So just look at it that way. It's like you're going to school, because there's no real school to prepare you for
I don't want to learn anymore.
being on a panel. There's no panel school.
I would totally go to panel school.
Panel school would be awesome. I think we got to wrap this up. Someone's got a picture with Jason Momoa in 15 minutes. So thanks, everyone, for showing up and listening. And thanks to the writers, Kyle Muir, Doug Hatters, Amy Benham, Nicole Demerse, and myself, and Deanna over there, and the WGC, the Writers Guild of Canada, for putting this together.